Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Microsoft Women in Data Scientists event. Today, we are very thrilled to have the women leaders in the field to share their insights. Dr. Karin Kimbrough, the chief data economist at LinkedIn, and Lisa Cohen, the director of data scientists at Google Gemini, Google Assistant, and search platform at Google. The host is Ilda Ladeira. And so we will have an awesome conversation. So hopefully everyone will enjoy and find it insightful. Before we get into the event, just a few kind of logistics. One thing is stay in touch and engaged with the community. There are multiple ways for us to join the teams and also the group. You will see that, and also we have the SharePoint to share the past and the upcoming information around the events. Women in Data Scientists and Microsoft has been serving the community since 2018. Over the 6 years, we have hosting multiple community events, such as the one that we're going to have today. We also have the workshops in the Microsoft ML conference. We also have mentorship program throughout the years. Over the years, the community continued to grow. Now we have 1,100 active members, and it continues to grow. So for the event today, just a few quick logistics to remind. We will start momentarily around the conversation. That is the pre-submitted questions that we collected from the community. And this is one of the most engaged pre-submitted events and questions, the submission. So we try really hard to consolidate the questions and address that to be discussed. At the same time, we really encourage everyone to have your question typing in the chat and also sum up the ones that you are interested and the speakers will answer the questions in the Q&A section. The event is recorded and will be made available in the YouTube Microsoft Research Center. And so that feel free to kind of share that with your colleagues and peers after that. With that, now I would pass to the speakers and have them start with their introduction.
All right, thank you, Shijing. I'm Ilda Ladeira. I'm a product manager at Microsoft, and I would say I was a little surprised, like when I was first approached to moderate a chat about women in data science, because I'm like, but I'm a PM, and like, does that make sense? But in a lot of my work, my research background and the work that I've done at Microsoft, I've always found myself to be working very deeply in experimentation, analysis of changes, and tied at the hip with data science. So that's, I guess, how I see myself as a woman in data science. For the past 10 years, I've worked on Bing search in various capacities, always doing a lot of UX-focused work, interaction design, and experimentation, and then also measuring how we're doing in production with our product. So I'm very excited to be here and learn along with all of you. So next I'll throw to Karin.
Fantastic. So hello, I'm Karin Kimbrough. I am coming to you from LinkedIn near San Francisco. I'm the chief economist here at LinkedIn. My mom asked me when I took this role, why does LinkedIn need a chief economist? And I was like, because that's where all the data is. There's a old joke about asking why somebody, a famous bank robber, robbed banks, and he said, well, that's where the money is. So I'm here because this is where all the data is, and it's a really unique opportunity to understand the labor market in particular, which is got a lot of asymmetries of information. It's not transparent. And so with all the data we have, there's an ability to, or an opportunity to provide a lot more transparency. Quickly, by way of background, before I was at LinkedIn for these past 4 years, I was actually at Google in the finance department for a few years. And before that, lived my life on the East Coast as an economist at banks and also at the central bank, the Fed. So that's my background. Really delighted to be here. I guess I'm not a classic data scientist, but many on my team are. So happy to share my learnings from them. I'll pass it on now to Lisa.
Great. Hi, everybody. Really excited to be here with the Women in Data Science community. I've been a huge sponsor and advocate of this group, so great to reconnect with Shijing, Mary, and Hao as part of this. And it's always just such a treat, I think, also to get to meet other women leaders in the community. So really nice to connect with Ilda and Karin here. Look forward to this conversation. My name is Lisa Cohen, so I'm currently Director of Data Science for Gemini, formerly known as Bard for Google, as well as Google Assistant and Search Platforms. So Search Platforms covers areas around latency, reliability, ensuring those great experiences for users on Google Search. For Gemini, we're looking at aspects around understanding the user experiences. How are people using Gen AI? How can we make this most productive and valuable to help folks as their creative collaborator achieve their potential. And then on the Google Assistant side, maintaining a great quality experience for hundreds of millions of users using Google Assistant every month. And then I think before that, I was leading data science and engineering for Twitter. So that was kind of across the breadth of experiences there, working on things like home timeline personalization, our growth and international strategy, the trust and safety areas, as well as 0 to 1 products like the Spaces experience, and core company-wide metrics and data engineering, which was also cross-cutting. And then before that, I had a long career at Microsoft. So I was at Microsoft for 17 years. The last group I was leading was a data science org for Azure customer growth. And in that org, we were, analyzing the overall funnel, understanding, along each step of the journey, how we could better improve the sign-on engagement experience, partnering with marketing, sales, finance, and various areas, as well as developing like internal machine learning models for each of those groups to predict high propensity customers, identify churn risk, cross-sell, upsell opportunities, as well as helping with our support queues. And then originally I started at Microsoft in developer division, working on Visual Studio and developer tools. And so I started in product in that group, and then I moved into data science over time as well. So it's really exciting, I think, in the developer space to see where that's come with Gen AI with the current wave as well.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to jump into the first question. I feel like you both touched a little bit on this first question, but anything that like you didn't touch on in your intro, maybe you could weave into this, but this is for both of you. And the question is to tell us a little bit about your journey in data science. So Lisa, I feel like you gave quite a lot of that just now. And then as you do that, also tell us what is your hidden skill outside of work. So I'll start with Karin.
All right. So I grew up in banking. I always kind of like to say I worked in London and New York. So I was not particularly thinking of myself in data science until I moved towards the tech sector. But what I'm realizing is the intersection of what I do as a kind of more of a pure case economist, working with a lot of data scientists and computer scientists and engineers, is there's a lot of overlap. And in fact, at LinkedIn, the way we think about roles they are kind of like groups of tasks that you use your skills and apply them to. And so a lot of the tasks overlap between what I do and what data scientists on my team, for example, do. So I will say, like, career-wise, it was completely like organic. There wasn't a plan. It just sort of opportunities arose. And we see that a lot in our own data, that careers are not linear. They're very nonlinear. And again, there's a lot of asymmetry of information. You don't quite know what you need to get to that next step. And sometimes you're not sure what the interim signal you need to send is to get to the next step. And so I think for data science, it's a career that's in flux. And we can talk more about it. But I would just say that for me, I think there's a balance between technical and business understanding. And I think what we see is like the technical expertise the need for those is changing over time, and it's almost accelerating the rotation in technical skills that are being sought in this space. We all know that AI is, pulling us along quite quickly, and generative AI as well. But a lot of the other skills are not changing. They are perennial. They're forever. And that's the communication. That's the leadership. That's the empathy. That's making good ethical decisions. articulating trade-offs. These are all like really clear skills that are still in demand as much as the technical ones, which are in demand but are rotating more quickly as change occurs. And then I'll just say my one hidden maybe skill that's not evident is, well, probably I'm a pretty good communicator. You guys can judge at the end. Maybe you'll see that she was crap. But I think that was a hidden skill I didn't realize I had. And by the way, I was a terrible communicator at the beginning of my career, and it got better with practice. So I'll stop there, but I think that's my hidden skill.
All right, you said something in there that really segues into the next question, so I'm going to kind of put a little note on that and come back to that at the next question. Lisa, go ahead.
Sure. So yeah, my background was in applied math, and I've always kind of really enjoyed these quantitative fields. So I think it's exciting in data science to be able to apply these techniques to the products and businesses that we're modeling and working on. When I first joined Microsoft, I think working in developer tools was a great place to grow up in tech, developing products for developers. And then I moved over to cloud when that big wave and era was starting, and I thought it was an exciting period to see how, be part of how we were changing the way of computing. When I moved to Twitter, that was kind of an opportunity to broaden experience from kind of enterprise to consumer and just kind of understand different DS approaches from, and also kind of network with other folks in Silicon Valley and gain some of those techniques and backgrounds. And then I think when the Gen AI wave was kicking off, that's when I moved into this role. I think also kind of the visceral feeling that there was something new and being part of shaping what this new era is going to be and how we shape products appropriately. And so, yeah, I think it's been an exciting space to see how our human interactions and expectations are evolving, how the tech stack and technology is just so quickly evolving as well. Yeah, so exciting area to be in. And then hidden skill, I'm a big softball player. I love being outdoors, but that's something that I've played growing up, and now I have kids, so I get to, help out with coaching and Little League, and it's just always a fun way to kind of get out on the field again.
Are you a tough coach or are you a nurturing coach?
They each have their place. Yeah,
nice.
But yeah, I think team sports, I think I'll just give a plug for that. I think actually teach a lot of great skills that come in the workplace as well, with kind of teamwork and resilience, acting under pressure. So yeah, I've been an advocate.
I agree. All right, this next question, I'm gonna unpin my pin now, is one about how do you manage balancing like the technical depth in your work with the business needs, the business understanding. And Karin, you kind of started touching on this. I was like, ooh, this kind of segues into that question. And then the continuation of this is especially as you grow in level in your career. So like, how do you balance that technical depth with that business understanding? And what are those like skills, those soft skills? I think you talked a little bit about communication that are crucial as you develop that balance. So I'll go back to, well, whichever one of you wants to take that one first.
I can start. I can kick it off, and because mainly because I'm eager to add on to the last conversation and say that I too played team sports, and I'm a fan of girls in team sports. So I'm, +1 to everything you just said about team sports. On to the question you posed. I feel that the beauty of skills is that they're portable and you take them with you wherever you go. Sometimes they're hard to signal, depending on what they are, but they are yours and yours alone, and you are going to have a unique combination of skills. None of us are exactly proficient in exactly the same way in all the skills that we use for our roles, so we're all unique in that sense. So one is like having a really good self-awareness. And I know this is not quite what you're getting at, but just indulge me for a second. So knowing what your superpowers are and what they aren't, and then deciding when you have something that's like a gap, how much are you going to seek to fix it versus compensate for it? And that's a decision you make in your career. So you might be someone who's really good at execution, very operational, but you're not always shining when it comes to strategic, stuff or solving huge, abstract, hairy problems. And you might say, I really do need to address this and get more experience doing it. But there might be other skills where you're like, I've never been really good at that. I don't know if I should kill myself trying to be an expert. I may find a way to compensate, little tricks to make myself more effective. Because the truth is, as you get higher, and this is the point I wanted to get to, as you get higher further in your career, you need to just be able to operate effectively. You don't need to be good at everything, but you need to be effective and impactful. And so that starts with the self-awareness of where you can lean in and you're really going to add value, and where you're like, I'm just going to make things more complicated and someone else is better at that. Let me delegate. So that's the self-awareness part. And then I would say what I think the other soft skill that's really crucial is, and most of you, my guess, will have it, but I really encourage you, if you don't, to work on this one, is the articulation of the problem you're trying to solve, and then landing it at the right altitude. So there will be people who are more technical than you and people who are less technical than you, people who are less interested in your technical expertise. And you will find that, like, if you need to go and describe a problem to the board of directors, you are not going to be an effective communicator if you're highly technical. You need to kind of simplify it, but not lose the importance. And it's the same for if you are trying to actually solve a problem with a group of engineers, you may need to be hyper technical. So I think part of it is self-awareness of your own skills. And the other thing I think that's really crucial for success is being able to modulate the altitude at which you are articulating information or a problem. And it's a super useful skill, because the 30 seconds with the C-level person that you catch in the elevator, where you can make that impact by kind of making them go, aha, but they understand what you're talking about, is hugely impactful, because they may not be technical. So anyway, long story short, I think it's self-awareness and ability to modulate your communication of technical issues.
Oh, that's awesome. I actually really appreciate the self-awareness, know yourself. And I think sometimes it's easy to feel like you need to be able to do everything that's asked of you, whereas sometimes it's just not possible, or maybe there's a delegation that can be done. So yeah,
thank you. It's not worth it.
Yes, true. Lisa.
Yeah, so I think for the data science role, really at all levels, I think about this Venn diagram with 3 parts: one around the technical skills, another around the business and kind of product domain context and expertise. I think kind of relying, connecting to what Karin was mentioning around really knowing the problem space, and then third, soft skills you're raising is really being able to communicate the work, influence for impact, the collaboration, prioritizing amongst the many opportunities and kind of questions that come in. And so I think with the question around, how does that evolve as you go in your career ladder? I think first, maybe it's hinting more to kind of a manager career, because I just want to emphasize also at all levels, there's kind of both IC and manager track. So really advocate for that. And I think maybe the tech is clear on the IC track that obviously would continue all the way through and can be a really impactful role as well. On the manager side, I think it's important to retain aspects of that. Of course, maybe the depth or granularity might change as you continue to maybe have this broader scope. But at the end of the day, you're still accountable for the team's work, and you're representing the work in kind of these broader forums. And so having that familiarity with the methodology, the techniques, kind of some of the key data points around our understanding our product and user journeys is really essential still there. So obviously becomes a balance to fit all that in. I think as you have that broader scope, there's other areas, as you're kind of asking, what are the other things you need to grow? And there are things around, setting that broader vision, leading broader alignment of partner organizations, teams within your organization, setting the vision maybe for the function, like the role of data science, and operating with these more senior executives, as Karin was mentioning also, with kind of straddling the language and really speaking the terminology of the audience. So so again, I think it's maybe not the same level of depth that you would have formerly on the technical side, but kind of finding the appropriate altitude and how to kind of still have the insights, information, and kind of accountability at the right level, as well, obviously, like enabling and having autonomous teams within your group as well. So a balance across all that.
Awesome. I really like that you both touched on altitude. I know you have many more years in your career than me, but I feel like that's a lesson that I had to learn coming from like my research grad school life, where you like give all the details and you know, like I did the study and I did the study this way and this is how my analysis was done. And then I realized that I had this like tendency to want to give all the details, and it wasn't always the right place for it, and I wasn't, altituding correctly. All right, this next question is for Lisa. So you used to be a data science manager, and now you manage data science and engineering teams. How did you make that transition happen? What were some differences that you've noticed in managing both disciplines compared to only the data science? And if you could touch on your experience, particularly in the Gemini world, in the like Gen AI, LLM evaluation side of things.
Sure. Yeah, I think some of it was actually maybe more natural, and the question might connote just because I think even when I was leading DS, before leading both DS and data engineering, always had just such a close collaboration with the data engineering team and appreciation for that part of the work, because it was just so critical to our deliverables. There's the phrase garbage in, garbage out, and I think just like more and more over time in my career, I continue to see that as we invest in the data quality, the data completeness, reliability, that underlying foundation actually is so impactful to all the models and things that we build on top of it, the quality of what we're able to build, sometimes even more so than like evolving some of the modeling techniques towards the end modeling performance. And so there was a lot of joint projects that we had done together, even looking back when I was at Microsoft, things like updating our partner mapping and like how that improved all of the models that relied on that within Twitter. Things like on the home timeline ranking, as we kind of increase the scope of the scribing instrumentation and the quality of that, and how that then improved the recommender models on it. And so, yeah, I think so as we'd had the strong partnership and we were always kind of building the roadmaps together, then it was, there was, I think, just some of the context on that space. And developers in general, I had kind of the earlier role in VS where I was more designing products for developers, demoing and using various developer tools. But yeah, it was a shift, I think, to kind of have the familiarity, I think, with the ladder, for example, the career stage profile, to make sure that we were appropriately covering that across the org. I think a couple other things I found as an org leader across both that I guess applies to DS and data engineering, but also as we had things like data analytics and product managers was important, was really elevating all functions to be equal peers, that we could have like the superpowers of each coming together. And so this comes into play. Like I started talking about some of the people processes, how we're rewarding and recognizing the contributions appropriately, making sure we have good familiarity on that across the calibration group, as well as aspects around like making sure that each are elevated within the leadership team. So like across the staff, it's not like one function is under another, that you see them all coming together equally. Even just little things about how you communicate or name the organization, and having that being common across the two, like updating your newsletters to be from the data science and engineering team. Sometimes data eng can end up being kind of behind DS, as DS is engaging more with the stakeholders. And so I think having eng have that context of like, what is the end deliverable we're trying to create, I think is really helpful. And then kind of both ways, DS kind of shadowing what the eng team is doing, can have appreciation for that work as well.
Anything that you wanted to add as far as like Gen AI goes? On that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think with Gen AI, we have this vast amount of data. You can throw the models at vast amounts of data and get really amazing results. But I think once you start getting into the supervised fine-tuning and reinforcement learning, human feedback areas, like you start to see many of the same trends that we've seen in other areas of machine learning, where it's not necessarily just the quantity of the data, but the quality, the completeness. Like you don't need duplication of data in the same area, making sure that it's representative of those user scenarios that you're really trying to cater to, I think is really essential. So again, kind of the investment in data quality there is essential as well.
That totally makes sense. Yeah. All right. This next question is for Karin. Also a transition related question. You transitioned from the financial industry into tech from banking, as you said earlier, originally. Did you experience any barriers when you made that transition, and how did you overcome those barriers?
Yeah. So I don't think I would think of it as barriers. It was just a very different culture. When you enter any organization, it's basically like this organism of exchange, of knowledge, of expertise and services. And so what's valued is different. And so it was just a different organism to go into a tech company. There was less process, for example, but more dynamism. It was at the time a less regulated space than finance. And I think that it was just, and you'll find this, and I'm sure, Lisa can speak to this as well, is when you move from one company to another, just the culture alone is different, even if it's in the same industry. I'm sure there's a difference between Microsoft and I think you said Twitter and Google. And I definitely saw it going from, say, a central bank to a private investment bank to a tech company to another tech company. So I think part of it is just navigating the culture. It wasn't a barrier. And I will say that I think also it is different to change roles early in your career than it is as a mid-career. Because when you change early in your career, there's probably a more predefined track and clearer expectations for what you're going to achieve to kind of, demonstrate your value. And as you get more senior, it's more abstract. It's like, well, what, not just like what's your scope or your domain, but also like what problems did you actually solve? What did you contribute? What was your impact? And no one's going to tell you what you need to go do. You need to go figure it out and advocate and get alignment and all these sort of like word salad of, corporate words, but you need to do all that. So as you get more senior, it's a little bit less scripted. So I would just say that maybe the hardest part was making a jump from an industry later in my career because there was a lot to figure out at the same time trying to demonstrate impact. But I had no regrets about it. It's been really, really fun to make the switch. The one thing I will say, maybe could I go backwards for a second and just touch on the generative AI piece? I think Lisa's way more experienced than me in this. I just wanted to share, like, we've been looking at this question too a lot. And one of the things that we're seeing is this, maybe let me put it a different way. Thinking about data science and engineering, everybody's coming at these roles with very different perspectives. So I see this as an economist. I will see phenomenal data scientists who are much more skilled at coding than the economists. No offense to anybody on my team might be hearing this. But they are sometimes struggling to tell the story of what it means. Like they're like, here's the what, but then there's no so what, there's no now what. And economists are usually a little bit better about saying, okay, the answer is 7, making that up, and that means this, and therefore we should go do that. So economists string together a better story. Data scientists are better at kind of robustly getting to like, is it 7? Is it, So I guess I want to encourage people who are sitting at the crossroads of different domains, if it's data science, if it's if it's infra, whatever it is, or economics, try to learn a little bit from the folks who are coming at it with a slightly adjacent data set, who are really good at one aspect. You might be really good at a different aspect, but if you can kind of toggle a little bit between those spaces, and I'm sure Lisa's doing this because she's overseeing a very big space, it kind of gives you a superpower. Because a lot of people get kind of very comfortable in their lane, but if you're able to kind of switch lanes a little bit, it gives you a few extra arrows in your quiver of experiences that set you up for opportunities going forward. So I just wanted to share that out. It's probably obvious, but I just wanted to share that observation.
Oh, I don't think that's obvious at all. Actually, instead of going to the next question, I wanted to poke a little bit on understanding a bit more about the specific transition you made in LinkedIn. Like I'm still trying to wrap my head around like what the economist piece means and what does it mean to be that like person in a tech company. Could you maybe dial into that one a little bit?
Sure. So it's not easy, right? I mean, it's very clear what you want from like your head of or chief data scientist, or maybe not very clear. I don't want to minimize it, but I think there's probably a more common set of agreed upon expectations. And I think for me, different functions had different expectations of what the economist would do. And there was a lot of like, I did a lot of like education. I was like, hey, I'm a macroeconomist with background in labor and, applied, econometrics and things. I'm not going to do pricing theory and auction analysis for you. Like, that's not my jam. I'm not an industrial organization economist. It's kind of like I kept saying to people like, hey, if you need a litigation lawyer, you're not going to hire a patent lawyer or a contract lawyer. So I had to kind of like reframe what people would be expecting and get them all on the same page. And that was actually a little bit of a challenge, an opportunity at the beginning, because people don't know what to expect of an economist. Like, why do we need one? And I'll say something that I got really good advice from someone in my career at Google, who I really respect and enjoyed working for. And it was that when you are starting a new role, whatever it is, dazzle in the first 3 months, lean into whatever you're really good at, where you're going to kill it, and go do that. Even it sounds a little risky because it may not be the thing your boss is asking you to do, but dazzle, lean into your superpower and demonstrate that. Everybody goes, okay, yeah, I see what the value add is here. I see what you can do. And that gives you a little ground and a little space to operate. And then you can go off and do the things that maybe you're okay at, but you're still learning, or it's going to be a little bit trickier, or that you just need to still build expertise and skills in. So I know that wasn't the question, but I'm always thinking about people and how do they grow their careers. And I just wanted to say that I found that to be a really effective technique when you're trying to demonstrate who you are and what you can do. Go and hit, in the softball analogy, I guess, hit a few home runs right as soon as you can. And then you get a little more room to like do the trickier stuff for the rest of the year.
I think you actually started to answer this next question. There's a lot in here about making transitions, navigating change in your career. So this next question, I'll throw it to Lisa first, but it's for both of you, is as you proceed in making transitions in your career, what are the crucial skills that you suggest others cultivate? So we touched on a few, right? We talked about learning how to be at the right altitude. You just talked about dazzling in the first 3 months. Carving out and helping like frame what your role is, if maybe others have different expectations of what your role is. Lisa, you talked a little bit about like making sure that you're recognizing and maybe it's a bit around framing, recognizing the different roles of people in your organization. So I feel like this has kind of been woven throughout the conversation. Like any elaborations or anything additional around like skills that you suggest people cultivate, be it like finding mentorship or learning new technical skills, whatever it might be.
Great. Yeah, I think this is actually from a mentor group at Microsoft where the mentor mentioned, to find your next job, do a great job at your current job. And so I think there's something with just kind of like leaning in with that passion. I know I'm also a big advocate of the strengths finder, like building on your strengths, and people see like where you can kind of really go above and beyond, just have that dedication and amazing impact that you have when you leverage that. And I've actually found in my career, there have been several transitions where, I was just working really well with another group in my role, and then kind of the next natural role was actually in that other group that kind of aligned with my career path as well. And it's a really natural transition because you already have that strong partnership and familiarity. And then I think another thing I will say is, if there's a certain transition that you want to make, maybe to use the Nike "just do it" motto, I find sometimes, start in your current role. Let's say you want to move into data science from program management. And there's a DS project that you can volunteer for and pick up with the data scientist who you're partnering with. That's a great way where you can start to get the skills, you can get some mentorship from that person, and then it actually kind of becomes part of your resume or experience as you're going into that next role of like something that you've accomplished or delivered in that space. And same if, let's say, you're an IC and going into management, like there's a lot of different paths or different directions you can go, but maybe for that one as well, let's say, you can start mentoring, managing interns. And again, I think through that, you kind of get to know yourself. Is this something that I enjoy? So it's an early way to try out whatever that transition is that you might be considering, getting feedback and experience in it as well. I do think networking is wonderful as well. It's a great way to just get insight into broader areas. And I find in those conversations, you step back and can reflect yourself, get some broader perspectives on just thinking about, what you want to be doing and where you want to spend your time. And those folks can kind of introduce you also to other areas, and you can vice versa, do the same and help others that way too. Karin talked a bit about adapting. And yeah, I find that as well, that on the one hand, like there's those strengths we talked about that you want to be able to leverage, and there's a lot of like great practices that you might have developed in your prior role that might be new, maybe when in your new function, let's say you're switching disciplines or ladders, or you're moving different companies, and like what was just common table stakes where you were before is actually really new and productive in the new space. So you do want to bring those things over. On the other hand, like maybe if you're kind of going to kind of a new altitude of leadership or different areas, there's also an aspect of what got me here won't get me there. And so kind of also taking those moments to reflect on like, is this productive in this environment, or is this a different culture? And maybe I need to kind of find a nuanced different way to help this land here. And so I think when you go into that new role, having that 30, 60, 90-day plan where you start as a sponge, listening, observing, seeing how things are working, and then kind of getting those really deep insights of how to best operate in that new environment.
Awesome. Karin, anything you wanted to add?
I really think Lisa touched on all the perfect points that I would have made. Maybe just to like share a framework, because economists love to think about frameworks. So here's how I learned it back in the day from this brilliant woman on Wall Street. And she was like, look, there are different kinds of people in your life to help you move forward in your career. So at the one end of the spectrum, you're going to have your friends who know you, they know what you're good at, they can be brutally honest with you. This is the person you cry when you didn't get the promotion you wanted, you call up and complain and do all your low grade bonding with. And, this is the person you can be completely open with. And this is your friend. And you don't have to be productive. It's almost like a venting, right? That's one thing. And they may also give you good advice and really frank advice, like, hey, you are really good at that, but maybe you're not showing up so well because of this issue or that issue, whatever it might be. So that's like your frank friend in the background. Then there's, of course, your mentor, right? So your mentor is the person who you go to with a specific issue. And usually mentor is senior to you, and usually you should not waste their time with some broad, open, like, hey, just hang out for 30 minutes and chat. Like, go in with an issue you want to chew on, like a problem that can be addressed or tackled, and have that mentor help you think through, like, what are strategies for addressing this or improving or operating or executing on it, whatever it is. But be targeted with your mentor. Don't just go in there like it's a friend conversation. That's a mistake. Don't do that. Then there's your sponsor. Your sponsor is someone totally different. They may not want to meet with you. The sponsor does not have time to meet with you, but the sponsor is in a room that you're not in, making decisions about resource allocation. And if you're on their radar screen, they may be like, there's a young woman over there who I think will be perfect for this opportunity. Let's make sure she's in this project. What you want from your sponsor is someone who's thinking of you when you have no idea that the conversation is happening. And that's a lot of that's harder to get. It's not something you can sort of orchestrate. It's probably like being amazing at the current job to get the next one, as Lisa said. And then I just want to kind of reiterate that really quickly, and we can move on. But because I do think people get confused about what they're doing with different people giving advice. And the low grade bonding goes to your friend. The targeted problem in a curated sense goes to your mentor. And then the sponsor is hopefully the person who notices that you're killing it over there and brings your name up when the next opportunity comes up. And all three are really critical. And then maybe there's a fourth one, which is just generalized stakeholders, people that have an invested interest in your success because somehow it's adding value for them. Those people can sometimes be mentors or sponsors or friends, but they're generally kind of like that background Greek chorus of stakeholders that you also want to pull in when you need them so that they can be supportive for your next opportunity. Like, oh yeah, go talk to my partner over here. They can tell you how great I was at Project X. So I just want to give you that framework of like friends, mentors, sponsors, and stakeholders, and don't confuse the four.
I love the visual of the Greek chorus. Like that's what I'm going to remember. All right. I'm going to throw this question to Lisa. With the development of LLMs and all the agents, assistants, co-pilots that are able to do tasks like generating insights, business analysis tasks, coding, what do you feel are the key advantages for a data scientist? Like, how do you remain competitive? How do you remain, or in this landscape, show or add value?
I'm really excited about all of the data analytics tools becoming available. I think that all of this tooling, I mean, it's just, for one, exciting to see the capabilities, but also the way that it will expand what we're able to do as a data scientist. I think about it in the vein of increasing the level of abstraction. It's a term that I used when I was working in developer space as well, because as we were adding things like the async keyword or use for parallel computing, and so you're always looking at ways that we were in the language to kind of develop libraries to make it more efficient. So you don't need to redevelop this algorithm that's already been established, and so helping developers or data scientists really stay in the flow in that creative space, and then having more of this tooling on the implementation, I think will just continue to help us work more strategically, and have more output. I know that there is some anxiety in the industry of like, will this replace a data scientist? I guess I don't personally feel that. I think it will just continue to expand what we'll be able to do. I think that there's always so much more on our list that we want to accomplish, and so I think it will help us, just have further impact. And then maybe lastly, I often feel like, the most impactful areas that we engage as DS is actually taking those really broad business problems and actually figuring out what is the data science problem or project for us to develop. It's often not kind of given to us as a specific DS problem. It's kind of stepping back and thinking about what are the overall objectives, what do we want to do to help create an amazing user experience, and then how can I use the tools in my tool belt from DS to enable that. And so I think that's the space maybe that I would encourage data scientists to be spending their time thinking, not just necessarily taking what's asked of them, things that might come from other functions. I think that it's good to be curious about that and think about, well, what is the really underlying question that why are people asking that, and then think about the most impactful way that you can deliver on that with the tools available. And I mean, we'll see. Maybe the AI, Gen AI tools will continue to, I'm sure they will continue to get more and more intelligent over time, like with these long context windows. I saw people, taking videos of a bug and saying, just fix this bug. And so maybe you'll be able to just say, like, here's our business goals, like what are some DS projects I could pursue. So I think we'll just continue to see how the technology evolves, what's possible. I think, for near term, I think we still want a human behind the steering wheel to be able to audit and have like explainability of the tools too. And so I think, again, there continues to be roles for data scientists there. But yeah, I think it's an exciting evolution. I think that data scientists will continue to have an important role using these tools.
I love how that calls back to what, Karin, you said earlier about articulating the business problem, which is like can be very complex and abstract and high level. Yeah, you were going to say something.
I did. I could hop on. So from an economist perspective, we've looked at using the LinkedIn data and this is like a snapshot, right? Like Lisa will tell you, things are moving so fast that the snapshot is probably out of date to some degree, but we've looked at, like, to what extent do we think different occupations, and we looked at 600 occupations, might actually be disrupted or augmented or insulated from generative AI, like at a given point in time. And I mean, the bottom line is every role at some point is going to be impacted by generative AI, some more quickly than others. So the example I use is like the librarian may be more affected and disrupted by generative AI than the locksmith, but eventually they'll both be touched by it in some way. But data scientists are one of those 600 occupations that we mapped. And people always get worried. They're like, well, is my occupational dot on this map in the disrupted bucket or the augmented bucket or the insight bucket? And I'm actually like, well, you know, your dot represents this big bag of skills and tasks. Some of your skills and tasks probably are going to be disrupted, but there's a whole bunch that won't. And so I just want to underscore Lisa's point about the extent to which, as data scientists, as economists, women in engineering and technical roles, we are influencing decision makers and being proactive. You're not going to be disrupted. Your value will be in your ability to influence, whether it's a product decision in the tech space, but by the way, there are data scientists in finance that are also being very influential, but it's not for product. And that's because their specific knowledge and expertise and their judgment around it is helping inform important decisions and trade-offs that like leaders are making. So I just want to kind of underscore that I think there's a lot of value and there's no risk of like full disruption by data scientists.
Love that. All right, I'm going to move to, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to mention, yeah, +1 everything Karin said there. Maybe I think one other thing that's exciting about this development is just the democratization of data as well, and just accessibility of this technology to broader functions. I think the future programming language is English, and so it makes it very approachable to be able to reason over data for broader groups as well. And so I think, you know, another mission that we're part of in data science as data scientists is helping build more data-driven organizations, data-driven decisions. And so I think hopefully also just continues through that accessibility to be able to instill that further across the organizations as well.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to move to our audience questions that have been coming in through the chat. So the first one here, it's coming back to the skill portability. So from Melissa, she says, I love the framing around skill portability that Karin touched on. Would be great to hear you both weigh in on the trade-offs between leaning into a specialty versus being a strong generalist. Sometimes there's a crossroads that folks navigate a few times throughout their career. So thoughts on that? Karin, let's start with you.
Okay, I'll start. More curious about Lisa's answer. I have done both. And I never had more fun than when I was an IC because I didn't have to worry about anybody else. I had ideas, I could get stuff done. I wasn't in as many meetings about admin stuff. So I always want to like share that point about at least my perception of the freedom involved in being an IC to really focus on problems and dig in. But I think ultimately I'll just quickly end with saying it depends. It absolutely depends. Both paths have enormous potential to add value, both to you and to the organization you're in. And I don't think you should feel compelled to do a manager track simply because you're like, well, that's the path to, you know, fast advancement or more money or something. I think they both have been exciting for me, and I've explored both personally. So over to you, Lisa.
Yeah, I think I was also reflecting on the fact that, you know, both paths I think can be incredibly rewarding. So it's a kind of a personal question as well regarding going deep in one function or discipline versus having kind of that experience across those experiences as well. So like for myself, I actually started in product management when I joined Microsoft. Before I moved into data science, we actually didn't have a data science function yet. And I actually thought that it was pretty helpful then when I did move into DS as I was partnering with product managers, because I felt like I've been in their shoes. I kind of understand the decisions they're making, and like maybe the right time to raise a brand new idea or direction is maybe not right before like code complete or like the end of a milestone. Maybe as we're starting like the planning cycle, and we can really be a little bit more open-ended in our thinking. So I think sometimes moving across the ladders, does have that value and perspective in terms of being able to, think more broadly about the software engineering process. The other thing I was going to say is that even within data scientists, like sometimes within my team, one strategy that we've had is like someone would become a really deep expert on one part of the product, and then they might stay within the data science job family, but they actually move to work on a different part of the product, and then maybe a different part of the product. And then over time, they have this like really broad experience with the different data sets, and like the type of insights they come up with, stitching this all together is just like very transformational, I think, to the product direction. And so I think that's another way that, within one job area, you can also get that kind of breadth through different experiences as well.
All right, next question from Shalini. This may or may not be the last question we have time for. Could you touch on your leadership styles and strategies you found effective or ineffective as you thought they would, not as effective as you thought they would be, as you lead diverse groups of people with different levels of maturity alongside a rapidly changing tech landscape? Lisa?
Sure. Yeah, this one's been interesting for me because, I found that each company that I worked at, I really connected with each of the manager principles. They really felt like me, but then I think as a result of all of them, there's certain ones that really kind of stitched together, I think, to form kind of the final way I ended up looking at things. It was also just interesting to see the cultures in different environments. Like, I don't know if you think about maybe the memes that you see on Twitter is a very expressive space, and internally it was also a very, very expressive space, so very kind of like bring your whole self to work. And so even it's like something like an org change email was very personal, the way that folks would kind of share. So it was just interesting to kind of see, through these different environments, try out, like experience different cultures, and then and try this out myself. So I think that maybe that expressiveness side, the authenticity, has stayed true. And I think that applies with the diverse groups that you're leading as well. I think when you're being honest and people kind of see that authenticity with what you're trying to accomplish and deliver, and kind of communication above all, I think brings people along in a journey, especially as I've worked in various uncertain environments, for example, when we don't always have all the answers. Telling people kind of like the mental framework that I'm working through kind of helps people kind of come along that journey as well, and see like the different paths that things might go. Like when we were in we didn't know if Twitter was going to get acquired or not. And it's kind of like, well, in plan A, here's what might happen. In plan B, here's where we might be. And kind of here's how we're going to operate in the meantime. Yeah, I think, maybe kind of going back to those manager principles, I really resonated with the, Microsoft areas around, the leadership principle, modeling the values, the respect, integrity, accountability, the not letting issues fester, I think was something really important to me. And maybe that comes back to authenticity. But if you see something, say something. Like if something's kind of not working quite right, like let's just have a conversation rather than just let it continue, and in a respectful way, of course. And so maybe even coming back to like the DS and data engineering, sometimes those groups aren't kind of working in lockstep, and just being able to be open about like that retro of here's what's working, how can we solve it, we're all in this mission together, I think is a great step forward. And then, yeah, maybe one other that I've picked up at Google has been around respect the opportunity. And so that's kind of thinking about when you have a big challenge or responsibility ahead of you, just kind of kind of embracing that and even getting motivated by that. So whether that's kind of the AI transformation ahead, or kind of what the mission is of your product, and just kind of galvanizing towards that with the team.
Okay, I can go really quick. I think some of the things everything Lisa said if you do nothing else and just follow what she said, you're going to be in great place. Really just adding things on the fringe here. But I think tone from the top really matters. And I know you guys all know this, but sometimes you're not feeling the energy. Sometimes you're not feeling like you're totally on board with the decision that's being handed down to you that you now have to hand down, but you need to advocate for it and sell it. You need to get behind it, and you do want to be authentic, but you also need to bring energy, like as a leader. So that part is obviously, I'm sure you all know that, but that I think is really important. The authenticity, I could not underscore more. And then I think there's like a learning for me. Here's one where I had to learn to figure this out, was I would like to be very inclusive and have everybody's opinion and do this like group decision making. And I still love that approach, but it doesn't always work. It works really, really well when you are with maybe a small group of senior folks trying to make a decision. If you have a broad group of junior folks, they do need to be heard. You do want to get their input, but you need to go ahead and make a decision. You can't just like, noodle on things forever. So sometimes being decisive and just getting on with it, as opposed to like seeking the perfection that will take you 3 months to get to. And I think I learned that lesson the hard way a couple of times. I've now learned it. So for me, it was being more decisive and more clear. But that was for me. You guys will all have different lessons depending on the team you have, the size of it, how geographically dispersed it is. All those things matter for your leadership style.
All right, I'm going to squeeze in one more question here. This calls back to a point you touched on, Karin, around career changes being easier in your more junior. So that ease of change point that you made, from your perspective, how does that apply if you make a change when you're higher level senior position?
I know we're short on time, so I'll be quick. Yeah, go ahead.
What would you adjust, I guess?
Yeah, I think you need to be really clear. I mean, you mentioned this 30-day, 90-day expectations, and I think that's important, being really clear about what you're going to hold yourself accountable for. And the more senior you are, the more you are accountable for outcomes. So you need to be really clear about that. There's always an element of like showing up and wanting to learn. But the biggest thing when you are senior is you are a decision maker, but you also need alignment. You need allies. And so going off and building relationships with partners that you are going to need eventually, maybe not today, maybe not in the first 30 days, but 60, 80, 180 days from now, you're going to need some alignment and you're going to need a relationship with that person. So it's a lot of relationship building at the beginning. So as much as I said you need to dazzle, you also need to be building really strong relationships before you need to ask something of somebody. And I think for mid-careers, that's incredibly important.
I think that also ties in nicely to the question we had earlier about what skills to cultivate as you're making transitions. And Lisa, I feel like it ties to your, authenticity point as well, because there's building relationships one-on-one, and then there's building relationships with your entire team and doing that through being authentic. So I really love that. It feels like there's just like so much cross-referencing between what you're both saying. I think that's all we have time for today, but thank you so much, both of you. This was an awesome conversation. I feel like I took away a lot, reflecting on how I've done transitions I'm experiencing right now. So thank you so much for this conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, likewise. Thank you.
Right.
So wonderful chatting with you all. Great questions.
Thank you for the amazing
much.
questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your week. Bye.
Same to you. Bye.
Bye.